It's sort of excruciating, isn't it?
There's no sort of about it, Phil.
A number of things. I mean, firstly, at the level of writing, obviously, if you had read that out loud yourself before, you might have had the thought, pies don't grow. Wouldn't you? Pies are just made, and you could make a bigger one, but the metaphor's dead on arrival.
That pie isn't big enough.
That pie... I want a different pie.
A different pie that's larger. So
a larger pie, yeah. We'll have more. Yeah. Or maybe we'll have another pie.
Yes.
But the moment you get into this very interesting pie discussion, you realise that it's pie in the sky. Yeah. So, you can see I've done this before. You realise that's just not a metaphor that's ever going to work, and it's ridiculous. And everyone is going to be the centrepiece of the speech. So it was terribly written, terribly wooden. Even in that clip, you saw a number of cliches. So really, really completely leaden.
And what made? I mean, this is probably quite a long list, but what made your toes curl most as a practitioner? That you're, oh God, come on, you can do better than that, even in these circumstances.
Right at the beginning of that clip, where he said we're going to step up. Yeah. And get Britain moving. And they're such tired thoughts. They're such boring metaphors. We've heard them all before. They're completely dead metaphors. And there's nothing vivid in the language. So it just there's nothing being said. And I mean, that's at the root of it, that there's nothing being said, in fact. And her animus is trained against people. Who are they? These anti-growth coalition. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's everybody. It's like there's a great clip on YouTube of a football fan walking down an alley, and at the bottom of which there's about 10,000 Millwall fans. And the guy's, there's no way out of this alley, and the guy goes, "Come on, I'll have the lot of you." And that's what she's sort of doing there. And he gets beaten to a pulp in the clip. And
I mean, it's never a good idea. Probably not a good basis upon which to govern the country.
No.
One assumes.
It's one of the things she's doing.
What do you think is... I mean, it's interesting because what is going on there? Psychologically, why... Is it simply because she's not looking beyond the room? Is she even looking at the room?
I think you've got to... what she's doing is trying to find a division. You're trying to find something in the speech. All speech is like Aaron Sorkin on... have you ever seen his masterclass on writing? It goes on for about an hour and a half, but he's only got one point, which is that writing is about conflict. Yeah. And he's right. He just doesn't have anything else to say. And she's trying to find a conflict. So within any speech, your governing idea has to be something with which someone can disagree. Most speech writing falls over and becomes banal because the original proposition is a platitude. And if I say something like, I'm going to write a speech about why our people in this company are our greatest asset, there's no speech to be given along those lines because no one in their right mind will say, our people are idiots and we should get rid of all of them. Even if that's true, they won't say that. So there's no real conflict there. And so she's looking for a conflict, and my God, has she found one.
She confects one.
She confects one. Yeah. She's confecting one. It's like Ed Miliband did the same, didn't he, with producers versus predators. Yeah. You confect, it's a conflict of your own devising, and it's really, really pitiful and bad. And I would have just avoided it, because actually in the 25 minutes she gave herself, there's plenty to say without having to do that. And I've got more sympathy with that section where she tells a personal story. Yeah. Now, it's not a particularly great one. It doesn't go anywhere. With those stories, what you want to do, of course, they should become metaphors for who you are. Yeah. So, like when I was involved in Keir Starmer's speech last year, when he talked about his parents, it's an introduction to the nation. And my favourite moment was when he said my dad was a tool maker and so in a way was Boris Johnson. My contribution is usually like mucky jokes like that. But that was an attempt. What we did with that was to pull it all the way through so that your personal biography is not just a series of detached and orphaned memoir at the front. It becomes the frame through which the political life can be understood. So I believe in these things because of this experience. Now, if that was a speech on a sort of Germaine Greer, a speech on feminism, and my feminism was born on a plane when I was forced to be the hostess and not the pilot, well, then that would have had some metaphorical impact. But it wasn't. It was just an orphan at the beginning, and it died. And so she needed to thread that story through, or indeed find a better one. But we needed some indication of why she thinks what she thinks, because that then gives her permission to say, in the midst of the chaos, well, I know it's not gone as well as it might have done, but these are my beliefs. This is why I think this, and this is why in the fullness of time I think this will work.
Is she right, Phil, to denounce the preceding 12 years of Conservative government quite as explicitly as she has. I mean, there are people who would argue you've got to do it when you've had a moment as dire as the Johnson implosion. But
do you know, I would have done the opposite. I would have done the opposite. I would have done. There are risks both ways because, of course, the character of those governments has changed remarkably. I mean, the extraordinary adaptability of the Conservative Party has never been on greater show than over this last decade. You know, from coalition to a solid and stable government of Theresa May to Boris Johnson's sort of Gaullism to Liz Truss's libertarianism. It's really, really been remarkable. And so I understand the requirement to define yourself against your predecessor. Gordon Brown did the same when he took over from Tony Blair to no great effect. I think time is too short for that.
Yeah.
I don't think she's got time to do it. And I think the circumstances are too bad. Even before they were exacerbated by Kwasi Kwarteng's budget, the circumstances were just intrinsically bad. It's worth saying that often we judge a speech and we say, oh, she's so weak. But actually, she is weak. The actual real strategic position is in fact weak. It's not a product or a property of her poor rhetoric. It's a fact to which her
it's
rhetoric
not a
has to respond.
presentational dilemma. It's a given.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
No one really ever had a communication problem who didn't have a problem.
Yeah.
And she has a real problem. So I would have done the opposite. I would have said, and this would be just as audacious given those changes in political complexion. I would have said, we, this party, have been in power for 12 years, and what a good 12 years it's been. And then you've got the chance to enlist the Michael Gove reform in schools. You've got years of the health service with good funding, relatively good funding. You've got things you can say. You can then do a sort of Gordon Brown list of achievements, which is lauding Conservative government. I would have made the dividing line Conservative versus Labour.
Yeah.
You know, not controversial, I wouldn't have thought. But these days it is controversial because all the dividing lines are within the parties.
The anti-Conservative coalition.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I would have done that we are the custodians of growth. Look at how we managed to salvage an economy when it was on the brink of disaster, you would say, and we paid down the deficit. Of course, we've got back into trouble again. Not our fault, as you know, because of the necessity of supporting people during COVID. And I would have taken on the 12 years and therefore had something to say. Yeah. I would have had a record to run on. Because at the moment, her record is 3 weeks long and it's calamitous.
Yes.
So I would have gone for 12 years.
And it's based on the votes of about 37 people.
Yes.
So it's not
exactly.
an ideal thing.
So to put herself in the tradition of the Conservative Party, even the immediate tradition of the 12 years, and then a longer tradition of previous incumbents would have been a bolder and I think a more sustainable move.
No.